The Pro Show is brought to you by Rockin' Media and our proprietary Flash HDR photo process, providing you with the best, most realistic photos of your property. See the difference at rockinmedia.com. Hi, and welcome to the Pro Show. I'm Rick Mackley, and we have a great show for you today. We're talking about the year-over-year statistics for the Denver metro area as well as down in Colorado Springs. So we'll see what happened in September this year versus last year. We also have two great Coldwell Banker agents who are talking about why you should buy real estate versus renting. And it's a great discussion about that. And Camelia has a wonderful listing that she wants to show you as well. That's next on the Pro Show. And today we have two awesome agents, Debbie Jacobs from the South Metro Coldwell Banker office and Camelia Corey down in Colorado Springs. Hi to the two of you. How is life this week?
It's been very busy for me. I don't know about you, but everything is kind of came out of the woodwork over the week.
It has been quite a unusual September and October, that's for sure. And today we have some new market stats for the year over year from September to September. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, and most of them are what you'd expect based on what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, but one has stuck out to me. The active listings is up 15%, which is, pretty high from 13,000 last year to 15,000. And these are both single family and multifamily properties. And the one that stuck out to me was that under contracts is up 28% here in the metro area from 3,735 to 4,791. New listings is up 11% to 6,255. Sold listings is down a little bit, which is why I think the total listings are up a little bit, to 4,119 from 4,212. So not a whole lot of difference on sold listings from last year. The days on market is also up quite a bit from 34 to 44. And we've only had a little bit of slippage on the median sales price from $575,000 last year to $565,000. That's a 1.7% decrease. And the average sale price is down 3% from $684,807 last year to $664,540 this year. And the percent of list price received is basically the same, and the affordability index is up from 49 to 56, which is good because I think the bigger the number, the more affordable things are. So that's really good. And as we head down south, so Camelia has some numbers to talk to as well. The for sale inventory in El Paso County has grown from 2,100 to 3,100, so that's a 42% increase year over year. So we've had quite a number of homes go on the market and are staying on the market down in Colorado Springs area. The days on market has also gone up 26% from 53 to 42. And so that's a pretty significant increase. The median list price, which is different than median sales price, has gone down from $525,000 to $504,000. So that's a 4% decrease year over year. And the new listing count is up from 1,080 to 1,152. So we've had quite a few new listings come on the market down in the Colorado Springs area as well. So what are you two feeling? Are you seeing these numbers seem to, in your local micro areas that you're working, do these seem to match what you're seeing out there in the real world?
Absolutely. Yes. It's interesting how an election year might affect active inventory and active buyers and sellers. And so that's what makes this year maybe a little bit more unique than last year. And also this season of the year, the fall season, I think a lot of buyers take a little hiatus over the weekends and go look at fall colors and things like that. So I know next month we'll get this month's numbers, but yeah, those numbers are pretty accurate.
Yeah, so you're feeling it. Sometimes, because each of you are working specific neighborhoods and parts, and you work up in Monument a lot of the time, Camellia, that sometimes those smaller areas, they're either seeing sales go faster, a little bit slower. What are you seeing, Debbie?
So just in the last 3 weeks, I've noticed a lot of properties that have been on the market for a little while are now getting under contract. So I believe that buyers are feeling secure that the interest rates are coming down just a little bit. There's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for buyers. And I think that they are starting to come out. Open houses are much more active. A lot more attendance at open houses is what I've seen, at least in the last 3 weeks. And because of that, I feel like they're getting a little bit of the next door neighbor is like, oh, well, see, they put their house on the market in early September and they did okay. So I feel like it's a little bit of a release of tension that has been building up over this last summer. And then, speaking to last year, I think there was a lot of news media that was really bouncing around about how interest rates were so high and it was so terrible. It was such a terrible time to buy for buyers. And I feel like that was giving a cautionary tale, and that kind of did impact buyers from last year.
Yeah, and of course now interest rates probably are about a couple of percent lower, maybe 1.5 lower than where they were about this time. Wasn't this when things were going up at that time? Was late fall?
Yes, there was a significant, I think, you'll remember that there was a significant increase that was over a very short span of time. So it didn't really give the buyer any kind of time to adjust to it. It was more like, oh my gosh, look at these interest rates. This is terrible. And, now I think, first of all, the lending industry has started to offer some point down, you could buy a couple of points here, you could buy a couple of points here. And then I think lenders are educating their buyers and real estate agents are educating their buyers that there is ways to reduce that percentage. And so I feel like everybody's getting a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, and obviously it's become the new normal, which I think makes it a little easier for everybody to go, okay, this is how the world works. And so not only are the buyers and the sellers getting more used to it, but I think they're also then coming to terms with the vendors, like the banks, the mortgage industry is also coming to terms with how it should work. Anything else you want to say about the market and this week, Camellia?
Well, one thing I want to say is I'm very impressed with how the builders have jumped on board with the whole interest rate trying to level out the interest rate and making it very predictable for buyers. And so they're, buying, 50 loans with a set interest rate so they can have guaranteed interest rate, lower interest rates for their clients. So I really like how the builders have jumped on board to make that more predictable. There's nothing like being a buyer shopping in the market and all of a sudden the interest rate moves up and now you can't buy the product that you've been looking to buy. You have to adjust to a lower purchase price, things like that. So in new construction, I really love the stability that the builders are bringing to the table with guaranteed interest rates at closing for these new builds. So that'd be the only thing I would probably add.
So I think what you're saying is they're doing a buy down on the rate to help with the affordability.
Yeah. Yep, they are. And what's really interesting this year from last year is we really have gotten accustomed to sellers willing to give that concession to help the buyer buy down their rate. That I really like because everybody's playing fair in the sandbox. It's like, wow, I've been shopping, for 6 months and now I find the house that I want, but the interest rate went up a whole point or whatever. So, we have in the last, 3 months seen, well, since maybe June, interest rates went down, but then they went back up a little bit, but they're still about 1.25 less today than they were back in June-ish. So, that's the interesting thing about being a buyer in this market is really watching how that interest rate plays out in what you can afford in a loan. So yeah, everyone, it's a team effort. It's the buyer, it's the agent, but it's that mortgage lender, and everybody talking every week. Can we still afford the house that we were looking for? So anyway, it's a dance, and it's a partnership. Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. Do you see a lot of new construction down in Colorado Springs? Because I'm wondering how much of that new construction is impacting the number of properties that are available from last year to this year.
Right. Well, there is a lot of new construction. We have Colorado Springs is in a kind of a growth phase. It's all happening kind of east of town and north of town. We've always had, custom home builders and such, but D.R. Horton is in our market, and they're expanding. We have Richmond American, we've got Vantage Classic, all the ones that have been around for a long time, but they're definitely developing and putting specs on the market. You can still customize some of these homes. But yes, I think what's really interesting is the resale market's always been in competition with new construction. And when new construction was at a standstill some years back, the resale market, there was definitely more activity there, but we have a significant amount of new construction down here. And that is, I'll tell you the truth about being a seller and understanding your market, is you have to understand, are you in direct competition with new construction? Because if you are, that is something to take into consideration with pricing your house and how you prep it and all that kind of stuff. But in our market, yes, in certain price points, definitely a lot of building going on, for sure. A lot of inventory to choose from. That's why agents need to be up on what that inventory is, so that if they can't find that product in the resale market, that they can go to the builder, the building community, and shop that.
And there's a lot of, the way each builder works is significantly different. Some of them are base price, and you're not really going to get a lot of, customization, or vice versa. You get a lot of customization, but it also will be very highly variable of what the end purchase price is. So that is really good to know. But I also work, since I'm working Southeast,
right?
There's couple of new communities. There's some new products that are coming out that are really exciting. And then of course you're seeing this expansion, to the south, southeast, and some of the more what used to be rural neighborhoods are now being really built out.
Ridgegate area down in that area is now, there's a lot of construction going there. Obviously still out east of E470, aren't there still some new communities going up there too as well? So
yes,
but having more choices is good for buyers, and now they can go out and not have to do a frantic buy and just buy the first thing that seems to fit. They can actually shop, which is good. And I think it makes homeowners a little more realistic as to what they can expect from their home as well. And I think that's part of what I was talking about, the new normal, is everybody's kind of getting into that mode of, okay, this is how it's going to be, and I have to, as a homeowner, trying to sell, I may need to do some concessions and the world of no concessions and 50,000 over ask or list price are gone. And I think those memories they're now becoming memories, is what I think is happening. So, it sounds like it's a good market for both sides at this point. And here once again is Nancy Alexander to talk mortgages. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm doing well. So I mentioned last week we might talk about different places you should go, or does it matter where you go to get your mortgage? But I think that probably depends on what kind of mortgage you're going to get. So I think we should back up instead and talk about different types of mortgages. Today, let's talk about FHA mortgages. Who qualifies? What are some of the restrictions? Are there limitations? That sort of thing. So let's start with who qualifies for FHA.
So everybody qualifies for FHA. It's a great place to start. And you can have an FHA loan, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not. It was originally built for the first-time home buyer, and it was for that buyer that had very little down. So minimum down is the 3.5%. FHA is a little different, you guys, in the sense of the way it calculates it. Take your loan amount, 300,000, 3.5%. I don't know. I'm not doing the math right at the minute. Let's call it 11,000, right? Then you come up with your base loan amount, Rick.
Okay.
And so then onto your base loan amount, you're going to add 1.75%. That's the cost of using FHA.
Okay.
It's called a mortgage insurance premium. So when you take your base loan amount times 1.75, that gives you your final loan amount on an FHA. So you end up financing a little bit more, but the pro, like you asked about, it's a 0.5 point better in interest rate than a conforming loan. So that's huge.
But you're paying that MIP, mortgage insurance premium. So
right.
Doesn't that offset it? The interest rate?
Well, it doesn't. The reason to go FHA, the main reason is that your interest rate is going to be the same whether you're at 620, 640, 660, 680. On those credit reporting scores, your interest rate is going to be the same. On a conventional loan, that doesn't hold true. The lower your credit score, the higher the interest rate goes.
Ah, okay. And are there limitations as to how big my loan can be, or does it matter?
It's county. It's a great question. It's county limitations. All right, now that's coming in at about 792. That number will get solidified in December when the Federal Housing Administration puts out their final number for 2025. So you can go up to that county limitation.
That's Jefferson County that you're speaking of?
Jefferson County, Denver County, Arapahoe County, Douglas County.
They're all the same in the metro area right now?
They are in the metro area, but watch when you go down to, say, Colorado Springs, because you go into El Paso County, it's lower.
Okay. Well,
when you walk to Boulder, it's higher.
Okay. That's why I didn't know whether Jeffco versus Denver County versus, Douglas would have any difference.
No, you're right. You're right. Most of them in the metropolitan are going to be that same. You're going to find them right now at the 792. So take your max 792 minus your 3.5% for your down. The other cool thing, Rick, about the FHA is you can do the down payment assistance program in the FHA. So in other words, can you have the 3.5%, which is the required down payment, gifted to you through what we call a DPA, or down payment assistance? And you can.
Who gives that? Where do you get that?
Well, every state has a down payment assistance program. Ours is called CHFA, Colorado Finance Housing Authority. And so the program actually runs through there, but the loan itself is an FHA loan, 30-year fixed.
Well, we have people watching this not just in Colorado, so check your own state and see whether what they have available for that down payment assistance. And next week, I think we should talk conventional mortgages. What do you think?
Sounds great.
If you want to get a hold of Nancy, feel free to give her a call, and she can walk you through more of the details regarding the FHA. And I appreciate your time today. Thanks, Nancy. And one of the biggest decisions you need to make as somebody out in the marketplace is, are you going to rent or are you going to buy? So today we're going to talk about all the reasons you should consider buying. And this should be a good discussion because obviously these ladies are in the market of helping you find that home that you want to buy. I assume if you want to rent, they probably can figure that out too. But let's just start out. I'm going to throw it out. Why, if I'm thinking about renting versus buying, why should I consider buying?
Well, for me, my biggest thought is that when you are buying a property, you are basically taking the money that you would normally be paying for rent. Let's just throw out a number, let's say $2,000, and you're actually pulling it from your bank account. And yes, you're paying a mortgage, but you really are putting that same $2,000 towards equity, meaning that at some point you're going to have, it's almost like a little mini bank account. Yes, there's interest that's being paid, insurance and possibly HOA payments or other things that might be paid out of that $2,000. But if you are a renter, that $2,000 is always gone. You're never going to get any returns on it, and you will just be, paying somebody else's mortgage.
Camellia?
Well, that's very well said, Debbie. And we all have to pay to live somewhere. And I like to tell buyers that paying a mortgage is really like an investment, like you're investing, like you're putting money away, like you would like in a stock or some other kind of financial place where it will grow. And so when you put money towards a mortgage, you literally are allowing that money an opportunity to grow. I have personal experience in buying a house. We were young, my husband and I, we've been married 41 years. We've probably purchased 15 homes over the course of that time, from moving and upsizing and all that good stuff. And I remember the days that we rented, and then I remember the first time we bought, and I remember when we sold every single home, and we were in our 20s, right? 20s, 30s. Every single home we sold, we got a check back to us. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It gave us the ability to buy the next home and then the next home. And then you go, wow, I can buy a house for me. How about buy a house and turn it into a rental? It really is a mindset that your money can grow when you buy a house versus rent a home. So when you personally have had that experience, it's very hard to tell somebody rent your whole life, because I have done nothing but make a profit on every single home I've owned. Whether from it being a rental property or selling it and having a profit. So that's a personal experience, as well as a little bit of being a realtor. One thing I love about real estate, being a realtor, is I see the other side of the journey of home ownership. It was me buying, my husband and I buying when we were younger, and now I'm helping other people buy. Doesn't matter what side of that coin I'm on, I don't see very many disadvantages of owning a home. There are a few, because some people aren't, smart with their money and things like that. But it has been nothing but an amazing experience personally for me.
And
I agree.
yeah,
And I also think that, when you start to look at your children, that might be looking into the market, this is a gift that a parent can give a child that is beyond anything else I can imagine. Yes, you can give them an education and college, but if you start saving up a little bit for them to be able to assist them with maybe a down payment, or utilize a little portion of your own HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit on your own property, you can actually assist your child in being able to be a homeowner, and it gives them a lot of stability.
I think obviously, because we were talking financial, probably like everything financial, it's one of those past performance is no indicator of future results. But historically, it's been the case that over time, the real estate tends to just keep increasing. What about the window? If I think I'm going to be moving in a couple of years, does it make sense for me to buy versus rent? Or what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's a good scenario. That's a good question to ask. And those are maybe it's not a good time to buy, but the strategy that a real estate professional builds around every client and their situation is super important. And timing is that first pillar of strategy. So if you're going to move to a city, you're going to live there for 2 years, and then you're never going to live there again, you're moving on, you're just passing through. Maybe renting for 2 years is something that you would do. What I like to look at is, what if you bought a house and then turned that home into a rental? Because you have to live in a house for 2 years before you can buy another one and get a regular mortgage without it being an investment. So I look at it from that perspective, ask that question, would you want to turn that home into a rental after that 2-year mark? And if so, if it's a good rental community, then maybe you buy specifically for it as a rental, not just as a personal home. And then you've built a portfolio of real estate. So that would be probably the question to ask. If that's not going to be the case, I tell people it's a 3 to 5 year window before you really can see a gain that would make it worth buying and selling. If you are truly going to sell after that 2 years, I beg the question, maybe you do just rent for 2 years, because I don't know that you're going to see that equity gain enough to be able to sell and make a profit on that. So it's just every situation is going to be different.
And
you just have to ask the question.
And maybe it's not buying a single family home, Debbie, it's buying a duplex and you live in one half of it and rent out the other half.
Right. And to Camelia's point, if you know that you're just going to be living in that town or city for 2 years, then instead of buying the dream home, which might be a higher expense and maybe a higher monthly payment, that may be exactly right. You're going to buy something that is much less the dream home, but much more affordable and possibly be able to gain the rental income back. So you kind of have to think about on the rentals, you have two components. One is you are going to be paying the mortgage on that particular property and the homeowner's insurance and HOA and, yearly taxes. But it depends on if you purchase it properly, will you be able to get additional money for the rental? And there for a while in Colorado, especially, we were really seeing with the low interest rates, a few years ago, where you could get into a property for a very low amount monthly, and then the rental was maybe 3 times the amount of the mortgage. So in that case, it would be a great opportunity to buy a rental.
That's good to think about. What about the intangibles, like having your own yard, being able to punch holes in the wall if you want to, or remodel, make it your own? Obviously, usually landlords don't want you to do that.
True. Yes. I had a client a couple of years ago, and they had rented for the last 12 years, and they'd moved around a little bit. And by the time actually, I think it was more like 20 years. And their kids were junior high-ish age, and he came to Colorado Springs and he said, I've been renting my entire married life. And he says, I'm looking back, I'm like, I don't know why I did not ever buy somewhere. So he purchased his home, him and his wife. And just in follow-up conversations, it was like, wow, this is so fun. I can just paint any wall, any color. I can take a wall down if I want to. I could just make this my own. And just the freedom he felt of living in something that he actually owned. It was just fun hearing from his perspective. But you're right, the intangibles, things like that. You can change out a sink, you can get a new fridge. You're not waiting on somebody to repair something that's broken. A lot of freedom felt for sure in the day-to-day intangibles of owning a home. That is a true statement for sure.
And obviously, if you rent a home, you can, an actual single family, you can have your own yard, but it's a little different than actually having your own yard, right, Debbie?
Definitely. I had the opportunity to help a first-time home buyer. I guess we closed about 3 weeks ago now, and he's been renting for 10 or 15 years, and there wasn't really any reason for him not to participate in owning his own place. And he called me up and said, I'm ready now. Let's get on it. We went and saw like 6 or 7 different properties, and he fell in love with the first one that he saw. And he was like, this is perfect. I can't believe that I'm going to be able to afford this and own this. And here's his security. He knows what his mortgage payment's going to be. He doesn't have to rely on the landlord to have, the same amount of monthly payment. His last property that he was renting had an annual increase. So for the last 10 years, he's been in that same property, and he's rented the same property for all that time. So, he's now very excited. He just loves it. And he actually is paying less in the mortgage than he was to rent.
Yeah, I've owned for probably 30 years now, and it's just a different feeling than when we all rented. I think part of the issue I'm sure, come up against is people wanting to start maybe above their means. And so then they talk themselves out of buying anything, as opposed to a starter home. They want their dream home on their very first home. And so it must be, an interesting discussion to walk your potential buyer through. Well, why don't you think about doing this? If you make a bunch of improvements on this home, then you can sell it in 3 to 5 years and actually then get that dream home. So it's kind of expectation settings. Don't you find you end up doing that a lot too, Camelia?
Yes, absolutely. And I think when you embark upon home ownership, you have to see the big picture. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go, buy a house and it's a one shop stop kind of thing. It really is, what is the lifeline of this investment? I'm just saying 25 years old, I'm going to buy my first house. Well, you're going to be buying and selling and living in a house for potentially the next 50, 60 years. And so when you are that first time home buyer or somewhere in this first 10 years, a good agent's going to set you down and talk about the strategy. You've got your whole life to be a homeowner. You have your whole life to let real estate be part of your investment portfolio. So I like to see it from that perspective, not just let's go hop in the car and buy a house. That is very short lived. That's just a very like instant gratification, period, the end. But investing in real estate it's a lifelong look at what your money can do, what real estate can do from growing your money, leaving an inheritance to your children, providing for your latter years of retirement. There's a whole lot more to buying a house than just finding a house and buying it and moving into it. So that's where I like to take my clients, is down that entire path of what does it look like? In 60 years, looking back, what have you done with that investment in real estate? Because honestly, if you don't go there with the whole idea of buying, you could potentially just be making one mistake after another after another. So if you lay out the path first and then start where A is, then B, then C, and really grow down that path, that strategy that you built out, you will have win after win after win.
And Debbie, do you find, like with my sister-in-law, she bought right at the height of the market, right before the crash in '08, and she literally lost 40% of what she paid overnight with the '08 crash. But her vision for why she was buying a home wasn't the investment. So people can have different reasons for getting into homes. She wanted a home. And while everybody around her was just basically leaving the keys on the counter and walking away, they stayed with it. And now their home is way above where it was when they bought it. But that was, it took some time to get there. And that was part of their plan anyway, because they wanted a home. They didn't want to have they weren't thinking of it necessarily as an investment. So I'm sure people have a different attitudes as far as why they're buying a home too.
Well, and that 2008, 2009 time period was a very scary time for, some people, especially because of the news media, right? Oh my gosh, my 401k went down, 60%. My house now is down 40%. But, you do need a place to live.
Right.
And when it's your place, unless you sell it, you don't lose any money. It's just paper money that's actually experiencing the loss. Just like you wouldn't probably sell all of your 401k when it was down at the bottom. You would wait for it to recover, which is the normal market cycles that we experience in any type of economic, plan or financial plan. So because of that, you're still getting the stability of what schools your kids are going to. You're still getting the stability of, I know how many minutes it takes me to get to work, and you still own that property. So, unless you panic, it will, eventually recover. And you think about average, 3 to 5% a year equity increase. Even if we have this drawback, which we might have a little drawback this year, you're still gaining over the course of the years.
And it would seem like that. So expectations, having it as an investment, but just from my perspective, and I know you guys don't want to talk necessarily about this piece of it, is when I bought my house, I looked at it as my mortgage payment is going to be X. And yes, my insurance and my taxes are probably going to go up, but the actual mortgage payment is going to stay fixed. So, and I grew up in a high inflation. This hasn't been high inflation, what we've had in the last couple of years compared to the 70s. I grew up in that mentality of, well, if my mortgage payment is back then, say $700 a month, it's never going up. If I have a rental, it's got, if I'm renting, it's going to go up. And therefore, the cost of that mortgage, to me, as inflation goes up, the cost of that mortgage actually goes down, because the value of money changes over time as well. So if I know people change houses a lot more frequently than I do, but my $700 or $1,500 mortgage payment, whatever it is, over time, in 10, 15, 20 years, that's going to be worth a lot more to me, and a lot, it doesn't cost as much to do it. Whereas my rent might have gone up to $2,500 a month over that same time period. So that it's also something you want to think about as far as doing a variable interest rate versus a fixed interest rate, because that can also have an impact on it as well. But what are some of the other advantages to home ownership? Are there others?
I'm going to drop in one thought here about home ownership that I think is overlooked, especially for the older generation of people who literally did buy a house and lived in it for 30 years. So that has not been my case. My husband and I have moved often, but there are people out there who have lived in their house 30, 40, 50 years. And what's happened over time is they've paid off their house, their home value has increased, and now they're sitting on a home that's completely paid for, that has a lot of equity. And they have, as a homeowner, an opportunity to stay in that home and live off the equity. And there's a product called the reverse mortgage. It's morphed and changed over the years. But I absolutely love that, because you don't have to leave your home to take advantage of the funds that you have in it, the equity that you have in it. It can pay you back to live in your home. So I really like that. Now, if you sold your home and took that money, you still have to go find another place to live, versus just staying in your home and just changing up, how you use the equity. So that's an opportunity that you would have if you're older and lived in your home for a really long time, or if you invest in properties now and have them as rentals. I'm in my 60s now, and we, had opportunity to have investment property. If you're a homeowner and you turn that into investment property, you can sell that investment property, trade it in for other investment properties, or let that be something that you use in your current life. Like if you had to sell an investment property, to use it for emergency or to fund something, another investment, you have that opportunity. So anyway, when we are in real estate, we see the value of investing in it. But it is a long game play, in my opinion. It's not a short game play. It's a long game play.
A couple years ago, I did there was one lady who was in her 70s, and over the course of their life, they had bought like 8 investment properties, and then they were systematically selling them off. And I kept showing up to do photo shoots. Oh, we have another one today, where she was like, yep, I'm done with being a landlord. I'm going to now use this as my retirement fund, is by selling off those properties. And during that whole time, she was basically gaining income as well through there, and at least covering the mortgage most of the time and then paying it off. I wish I had known that strategy when I was younger, because I probably would have gone down that path. And Debbie, can you if you're in your home long enough, can you take that equity and use it then to buy the next property? How does that work? I don't know.
Yes, so there's a product called HELOC, or Home Equity Line of Credit, and many banks offer this. So if you've been in your home for quite a long time, or if you were lucky enough to be able to put down a significant amount of down payment, most banks will lend you 80% of your equity. So let's just say for the moment you have $500,000 worth of equity. You can take that home equity line of credit, use a small portion of that. It does have an interest rate associated with it, but you can take a small portion of that to actually do a down payment on another property. Then with that home equity line of credit payment, and then the mortgage that you would eventually get into, that helps you to cycle that same amount to another property. Once you have a tenant in that property, you can start to investigate to find additional properties. When that second property has equity established within it because it's been rented for a number of years, you can then also do a home equity line of credit on that property. So it cascades on being able to utilize that equity through that particular product. I'm sure there's other products. I'm not a lender, but that would be one strategy to consider.
But it makes it important to choose that second property wisely, because the last thing you want to do is then have a mortgage on another property and you're not able to rent it. And obviously, over the last 5-6 years, a lot of people took that strategy and did Airbnbs in places, and then the Airbnb strategy changed. It seems like, Camellia, long-term rental strategies seem to be a much better option. I know this isn't really what we're talking about in this, but it kind of segues together as to why you should own.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Owning a property gives you options. Owning multiple properties gives you options. I will say that when I was first in real estate, and I got in 2005 at the very end. And so 2006, 2007, I started going, oh, wow, what's going on with the market here? I was new as an agent, but I was watching. And I was watching other people who had invested in real estate over leverage. While home ownership is wonderful and having rental and investment properties is wonderful, the biggest mistake that people made in that time is you do have to have a stash of funds in the event you can't rent your properties out. And when you don't do that, sometimes you're forced to sell or you have to give up your property. In that 09 market, 8-9 market, I saw a lot of people losing their properties because they didn't have sufficient savings, sufficient monies set aside for making those mortgage payments when the market got, a little bit soft. And so people forget that part of home ownership. There are expenses and there are the safety net. You have to have that if you're going to go that route.
Yeah, in fact, I think Warren Buffett, he coined the term, you can see who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. And a lot of people were swimming naked during that time, buying and not having sufficient means to hold on to those properties, and lost a lot of properties at the time, which is why I think the inventory in the metro area grew to 30,000 active listings in 2010 timeframe. So you want to buy wisely, but I wish I had known that strategy 30 years ago. I probably would have started down that path. Camellia.
One thing I want to add to that, when the HELOC, Debbie brought that up, that was really it's really smart and it's very wise of an agent client conversation. If you're going into that investment kind of property portfolio, to get a HELOC, everybody should open up a HELOC on their properties just to have that money sitting there. If you have any kind of equity, you should go to Ants or whatever credit union or your lender and open up a line of credit just to be able to have access to that money. One, for an emergency, but number two, do it when the interest rates are low, because I know HELOCs can be as high as like 9%, as low as like 3%. So I would be shopping that interest rate for a HELOC and just have that money sitting there at a low interest rate. I think your HELOCs, you can open them for like a 10-year window. I think that's when they expire, is every 10 years. So whether you use it or not, at least you have it open at a low interest rate. So that's number one, because when the world goes on sale, you want to have the money to buy. So when people are, like back in 09, when they were like literally $200,000 townhomes were selling for $69,000. I learned that lesson. It's like, always have the ability to have the equity that you have in your home setting somewhere in the event the world goes on sale and you want to go shopping. So whether that's, in stocks or whatever, we're talking real estate here. So that HELOC would be that little pot of money that you can pull from when you can find a deal that's too good to pass up. So that's a really good strategy.
That's a great strategy, because eventually we always have that on sale time periods. Debbie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you don't want to be struggling and scrambling to try to get the HELOC established when it's a down market, because that is very much more difficult, because income is going to be down possibly, or other stressors might play into that. So to Camelia's point, always do that when it's stable, your life is a little stable, and be able to establish that HELOC. And again, you don't pay anything for having the HELOC sitting there without actually borrowing money from it.
I think obviously part of the home ownership piece is making sure that you're not living just for your home. A lot of people buy at the top of what they can afford, and even maybe a little bit ahead of that or on top of that. And then it just becomes a stressor and not something that's good. So, finding the right home at the right price for you, I think is probably important too, right, Debbie?
Yes, I think that that's really key. And I also really advise my clients to think long term. You don't want to be so house poor that you're not being able to set aside for a fabulous vacation or for, other types of savings. And maybe you're going to have a college fund or whatever you want to do in the future. You want to make sure that you've got a comfortable living experience so that when you find that new couch, you don't have to worry about, being so strapped that you can't afford it.
And of course, houses aren't free. They always have things coming up. And so if you're cash poor, and you have an issue with the heater or something like that, you want to not have that just be a total stressor in your life as well, which of course goes back to that HELOC, as an emergency that might be important to have that sitting there as well. Any other benefits you want to talk about of home ownership?
It gives a consistency just for your lifestyle, and your overall experience about you're not having to worry about, costs going up that are unexpected. What if your landlord decides to sell the condominium complex or that particular condo, and the new landlord comes in? It's just variables that you're not able to control that you would be able to have a little bit better control if you were the homeowner.
I would agree with Debbie, and I think we've heard over the years that home ownership is like the American dream. It really is, and it's just a really neat thing to be able to say that I actually bought a home. I'm established, and I bought a home. It's for my family. It's the feeling and the sense of accomplishment that you get. But for me, I just see the whole financial piece of it it's like the first time you ever bought gold or silver, the first time you ever invested in a stock. It is along those lines. And I think it really does you mentally good when you buy well, not when you buy a house and it's above your means and things like that. We're not talking about that. But when you shop well and you have a strategy for that, there's the security of that, I would say, and the sense of accomplishment it's a wonderful thing. It's a good baseline to live your life from. So I love seeing happy homeowners when they bought a house and it's theirs and they fix it up and make it their home. I mean, it's a house, but it's a home. And it's just a wonderful thing to see that happen in people's lives. And it's a foundation for how they live and what the future has to hold for them. So it's a really neat accomplishment.
And doesn't it make you feel so? I mean, I personally love my job because I can really help, that first-time home buyer or investor or whatever happens to be for that particular individual. But the success stories for the client is just it's just amazing.
And this week on the Rental Report, we're talking to Greg Batchelor yet again, and we want to talk about trends. Are rates going up? Are they going down? Does it matter where? And does it matter what type of listing you're talking about? Hi, Greg.
Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great. And you?
Doing well, thank you.
So what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, great question. So we are in a period of very interesting uncertainty right now, which that is not abnormal. Number one, we see that every single time that there is an election cycle, especially a presidential one, and interest rates are not exactly sure what to do. The stock market's trying to read part of it. The bond market's trying to read other parts of it. And then obviously comes down to mortgage-backed securities, et cetera. So there's a number of folks that think that it'll probably remain slightly consistent and or perhaps a little bit lower than where they are now, but probably nothing significant for the remainder of this year, given the election cycle. That's going to leave the world open on both fronts. Number one, the residential side. We are going to see that some investors, that have cash and interest rates don't matter, they will still jump on it. They will lock in their properties, investment properties, continuing to add them to their portfolio. We're going to see more and more of that all the time. The flip side of that is on the rental side, we are going to see rental rates continue to decline slightly. We're not projecting that they're going to be substantial, but we are definitely seeing them decline right now. And that is obviously a product of interest rates and a few other factors.
So if the interest rates are going down, why would that impact rental rates?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the biggest component right now is based on where interest rates have been. There are so many would-be buyers in America that have put themselves on the sidelines for a little bit and chosen not to get in the game because of those interest rates. As a result, there have been more and more properties that haven't sold, and those have entered into part of the rental pool. Now, make no mistakes about it. People that have equity in their homes, you bought your home 3, 5, 7 years ago, you've got plenty of equity and you can go sell your home. It may not be the exact price that you want it to be, but you can absolutely get your home sold.
So are you also seeing then if people are able to go buy a house because now it's more affordable with lower rates,
Sure.
that then you have less competition for the rental as well because they're not trying to rent, right?
Absolutely the case. Yep. And that'll be the case. Most of our zip codes right now have about 2 to 2.5 times the inventory that they normally would have as we enter into Q4. And so based on that, it's just giving renters a lot of really, really good options. And it's requiring landlords to be very aggressive when it comes to their price points to make sure their place gets rented.
And I think, as we talked before, it's always important as well to keep in mind this is a good time of year to rent because we're into the holidays.
Absolutely. Absolutely the case.
Well,
This next month should be a really, really good time for folks to rent. Make no mistakes about it. The market is remaining strong. It's still very strong. I was just talking to my leasing team today. The market is solid, no doubts about it. But by the time we hit mid-November, people are beginning to think more about the holidays than they are about moving, and temperatures are getting colder. They plant where they are.
So is it a good time to put your house up for rent during that time or just hold off?
A lot of folks are going to hold off.
Okay.
The folks that have to, they will. And we get them rented. As a matter of fact, we had our office open just this past year. On Christmas Eve, we had it open till noon just because we had 3 or 4 tenants that needed to move in on Christmas Eve.
Well, that sounds great. Well, if you want to talk to Greg about renting and your house or getting a rental, feel free to reach out at the number here on the screen, and I'm sure he'll look forward to talking with you or have someone on his team give you a call. In addition to that, next week, let's talk about the advantages of renting a single-family home. What do you say?
That sounds great. Looking forward to it already.
All right, sounds good. See you next week. So we have a wonderful listing down in Colorado Springs at 7130 Lone Eagle Lane that is one of Camelia's homes for sale. So tell us about this home, Camelia.
Well, one of the first things to know about this is it sits at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's great. It's a great home with 5 bedrooms and 3 baths. It's a little over 3,000 square feet, under 500,000. So we're sitting at 480. The floor plan and flow is really nice because you walk in, you have a nice little entryway, and then you have your kitchen, dining room, living room combo that's just all right there. So it has great flow to it. The sellers have put in all new carpet, painted all the walls, all the trim, put new light fixtures in, hardware. It really is a move-in ready. I mean, if you're like shopping new construction versus resale, this is a resale home that really mimics new construction. Super big backyard as well. As you can see in these pictures, you have a 5-piece bath. in that primary suite. Great windows and great light. What really, the one feature about this home that I absolutely love is that there are 3 bedrooms on the main floor. So you have your primary suite, you have a good sized bedroom, you have a little bit smaller bedroom that we've turned into an office in that photo right there. But if you have little kids or just want to have your kiddos on the same level with you, you can do that. The laundry is on the main level, but as we pop down here into the lower level, that is a gigantic family room. So enough room for like a TV area, a work area. You have 2 large bedrooms down there, probably larger than the primary suite, but very, very large bedrooms. And then you have a bathroom down there with dual sinks. And again, the yard is amazing. It's been xeriscaped, so there's not a lot of maintenance required. A lot of privacy when you're on a cul-de-sac, and you don't have much behind you. Anyway, it's just in a great location in southern Colorado Springs. It's on Lone Eagle Lane, so 7130 Lone Eagle Lane. Looking for that next right buyer. So my clients have done a lot to get this home ready for the market. It is show ready.
Cool. I think you said 7131 Lone Eagle Lane. It's 7130 Lone Eagle Lane, or maybe I misheard you. So this is a great home.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in taking a look at it, feel free to reach out to Camelia. I'm sure she'd love to show it to you, and appreciate you bringing it to us today. Thanks, Camelia. Well, I appreciate Debbie and Camelia being on the show today. We had a lot of great information that we talked about. And if you want to get a hold of them, please feel free to reach out to them at the numbers here on the screen. And I look forward to seeing everyone here next week. And remember, you can find the Pro Show at your local podcast, either Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and of course, go to theproshow.com to see previous episodes. A lot of great information there. And I appreciate everybody's time today, and look forward to seeing you again next week.